we're talking about the federal intervention and the fact that multiple states are coming together, and we got 30 states plus that are recreational. We're going to up 10 or more that are going to be, 10 or more that are recreational, 30 that are medicinal, and so forth. And now the entire West Coast, including Canada, is all going to be at least medical or recreational. And we're talking about cannabis up and down the coast, and then border issues and so forth, and not just state but international. What kind of challenges do we have there?
Well, I tell you, good timing for you folks to be here, because next week there's a group of us going to Denver. We're having the third meeting of the Regulators Roundtable. We'll have 12 states present, some of the medical states, but as you said, there's 9 adult use states. Canada will be present in 5 of the provinces. We started this last year in Olympia. Then we went to Portland in September of last year, and now we'll be in Denver next week, where we're bringing just regulators together to talk about a lot of the issues that we have. The border issue won't be one of them, but for Washington, we're kind of unique. We've got Oregon legalized, and then BC will be legalized somewhere July and August, because as you know, Canada's got a bill before the Senate right now.
Well, Oregon's got Washington and California on both sides,
that's true.
too. So
I think that's an issue that's of concern to everyone, and certainly the feds is diversion of product. Even between the legal states, you've got international, you've got interstate commerce, which can't occur when you've got a federal prohibition.
Aren't your border stores a little bit more active than the other stores, especially the ones next to Idaho? And
obviously.
And then,
it's not uncommon. Remember, people have been going to Oregon for years to buy appliances because they don't have a sales tax over there.
Or booze.
Or booze.
We do know about that. And then when cannabis, before Oregon was legalized, cannabis stores on the border were pretty well trafficked.
They were, and then there was concern when it was legal, because for a period of time their excise tax didn't apply. As soon as the 20% excise tax went into effect in Oregon, then they started. Well, there's a difference in selection and product selection in the states.
No kidding. Oh, I didn't know that.
And that's something, when you talk about that specifically, when you talk about that, there's one of the concerns that I've heard, and that is, you alluded to it in an earlier segment, and that was about pesticides and so forth. Everybody seems to be different, and the consumer is concerned about what goes in them.
Right.
And it has been a very, the industry, if you will, cannabis people, if you will, are more concerned about, interestingly enough, health because of pesticides and those kinds of things. At least they tend to be more organic in nature, if you will. So that process is, so how do you reconcile all the different states coming in and saying, what do we get for a universal standard, or is there going to be anything like that?
Yeah, so that's called best practices. So one of the things that's really good and that we've had in these discussions, and all the states are doing this quite differently. One of the things that we didn't talk about that's unique to Washington is that you can't be vertically integrated.
Oh, that is interesting.
And remember, that took a couple of...
That keeps out a little bit of criminal
activity, right? Well, the idea was to break it up. In other words, if I'm a producer or processor of marijuana, I can have no financial interest, direct or indirect, in a retailer.
Okay.
I did not know that. And the retailer cannot. All the other states allow vertical integration. In fact, that's why it took 2 sessions to merge medical, because medical in this state has always been vertically integrated. Right. I would grow, I would process, I would dispense from my storefront or from wherever my collective was. That was the idea that the initiative put in place the old alcohol beverage law prohibition, which said that a producer or distributor of alcohol could have no financial interest in a retailer. Because before prohibition, all the saloons were controlled by the biggest distillers and the biggest brewers. So after prohibition, they created this separation. Allison Holcomb, who's the ACLU director, who wrote the initiative, wrote it to look like the alcohol beverage law coming out of prohibition. She wanted to break up the industry. And so what I just heard yesterday at the meeting that we had with the cannabis industry is, because retailers can have no interest in the producer processors, it creates a lot more product selection and availability for the retailers. There's a lot of places they can go. They don't just, like in Colorado or Oregon, they just don't have the weed that they grow that they're selling at their storefronts. They have to go to a producer processor, which means
It's very interesting.
it creates a lot more variety of product.
On just another note, though, just from to wrap up this segment, if you will, that also seems to minimize the organized criminal activity. That might
Yes.
occur from a
Somebody controlling.
doing the complete vertical
Absolutely.
integration,
Yeah.
and then controlling a large portion of the market. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. One of the complaints that we get a lot is hidden owners. So because people want to do that, they want to be able to have interest in a producer processor as
All
a
the way to the
retailer.
retailer.
And sometimes we do investigations and find that people have some hidden ownership in a producer processor.
So the question I have is, I have heard, and I'd like to get the facts about the number of stores an investor could own, or an individual could own, or an entity could own. Is it 3 stores in the state of Washington?
Or is
10
it growing? 'Cause
stores?
So it's 5 retail
5
locations.
retail locations.
And-
Changed, isn't it?
Okay.
It has. The legislature changed that. And then 3 producer processors, 3 production licenses, because I can have multiple processing licenses.
So you
Okay.
can grow in 3 different opportunities.
Correct.
And from that
Separately.
grower can have a processing license.
Yes.
But that grower processor cannot have
That's
a retail
3.
license.
Correct.
Right. That's 3 over here,
And
then
5.
a different entity or individual would have
Well, you can-
potentially up to 5 retail
What
stores.
he's saying is you can integrate a grow process, but you cannot integrate grow
Into a
process
retail.
And
Right.
you can't go backwards
Correct.
from retail to a process. It can only be grow process.
So the idea there in the beginning, and remember, I think the estimate that was made, so whenever you have an initiative to the people, there's a fiscal impact statement that's written by the Office of Financial Management, which is the governor's budget office, that suggests not only what's it going to cost, what are we going to see as far as a marketplace, how many people are going to come in, and I think there was an estimate that we made based upon conversations with Denver that we might get 2,300 applications initially, and we got over 7,000.
Okay. That's interesting.
It's only because you limited it to a lot of, if you would have opened it up to a little bit more financial
I think
opportunities,
so.
you probably had 20,000, 30,000. People thought it was a lotto.
Well, it was $250 to apply.
That's what I
Yeah.
mean.
So, I mean, there wasn't, I was going to expend a lot of money to try to be lucky enough to win the lottery for my location and get a store, for example.
Let me connect 2 dots from a prior segment along these lines. So, you spoke towards, it sounded like limited entry, the Alaska fishing industry, and Alaska being recreational legal as well. But essentially you were saying that you have a limited entry system. Is that correct?
That's right.
To enter this business. Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, it is limited entry in that the license is only $250, and you had to win the lottery to get it, or else you buy and invest in with somebody. But the actual startup costs are not insignificant.
That's true.
So that is, and if you can't get a loan or you don't have that, then it really isn't going to be a viable. But if you do have that license, those people could say, "I've got the license. Now let's search for a partner that has the money."
Right.
And that's probably happened quite often.
And the other thing is, when you're quoting the 7,000 applications and earlier the momentum conversation, this mirrors Gartner's hype curve in technology, that we get all excited about a technology. So today it might be Internet of Things. And then there's the trough of disillusionment. And then finally the market stabilizes. And 10 years later, we just accept some of the technology we can't live without it. And it sounds like we're going through the same thing with cannabis.
Well, it's
right?
ironic
there was the
that
hype, the disillusion.
Well, there was. We called it the gold rush mentality because that's really what it was.
Yeah.
There was a
I heard
sense
green
that.
rush, but okay, go.
Yeah, I
go.
think I heard that too.
Yeah,
but to your point, that's true.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.